Thorne McAllister didn't realize his life was about to become the universe's longest cosmic prank until the third time the coffee dispenser sparked at him. The first time, he'd cursed under his breath and assumed the machine was doing what every other piece of Earth defense equipment did: betray its user with dignity. The second time, the spark singed a hole in his sleeve, and he'd considered kicking it. The third time, it hissed and displayed a message that read, "Caffeine is futile. Return to bed." He stared at the screen, rubbed the bridge of his nose, and whispered to no one in particular, "Yeah, that tracks." Virulence 6 wasn't the kind of place you'd expect interstellar peace to begin. It was damp, overgrown, and smelled faintly like someone had microwaved an old fish in the jungle and left the remains to ferment. The outpost, EDC Camp Verity, was little more than prefab walls, shield nodes, and a dome that wheezed in protest every time the atmosphere regulator kicked in. Peace smelled like moldy socks and stale rations. And yet here they were, representatives of two empires, brought together by war weariness and a shared hatred for the Xylox pirates who tried to blow up half the sector. Thorne had been assigned here as a tactical liaison, which was military speak for, "We don't know what to do with you, McAllister, so go teach the alien queen how humans throw grenades." They hadn't even let him finish his coffee before delivering the news. And now, an Ophalari Royal, yes, the queen herself, was scheduled to arrive within the hour. Not that anyone had bothered explaining how he was supposed to mentor a being who had once vaporized a rebel fleet for interrupting her poetry recital. The woman was a living legend, a war icon, and possibly a sociopath with a crown. Thorne had barely enough tactical training to win at laser tag. The transport ship touched down with all the ceremony of a falling refrigerator. Thorne stood on the landing pad, his uniform rumpled, one boot slightly unzipped, wondering if it was too late to claim sudden amnesia and start a new life as a moisture farmer on Mars. Then she stepped out. Queen Arvalai was not what he expected. Sure, she was tall, gracefully so, like someone who'd evolved specifically to look condescending from every angle. Her skin had a faint opalescent sheen, not quite silver, not quite blue, like moonlight soaked in starlight, and her ears, long, pointed, rising like elegant antennae, twitched with every sound, catching more than just words. She wore armor that shimmered as if coated in living crystal, each piece humming softly with embedded energy circuits. Thorne opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Private Thorne McAllister," she said, her voice like polished glass. "The human who once attempted to flank an enemy while walking directly into a reflective field. I've read your dossier." "Great," he said, managing a grin. "I was hoping my greatest hits would make it all the way to alien royalty." Her expression didn't shift, but her left ear twitched once. Maybe that was a smile in Ophalari. Maybe it meant prepare to be disemboweled. "I am here to observe and integrate," she said. "Teach me." "Well," he said, turning toward the compound. "First lesson, always duck when you hear a whirring noise. If it's friendly, it'll still hit you." She followed silently. Her footsteps made no sound. Inside, the camp's control center was a disorganized miracle of bad wiring, flickering holoscreens, and tactical charts held up with space tape. Arvali glanced once at the room and said, "This resembles the refuse chamber of a Scorvian mining barge." "I'll take that as a compliment," Thorne replied. "Those things are famously efficient, also famously haunted." She didn't laugh, but she didn't stab him either, which he filed under progress. The first briefing went as expected, badly. He tried to explain guerrilla tactics using a model of urban warfare on Europa's southern city clusters. But Arvalai kept interrupting. "You willingly enter sewers to ambush the enemy?" "Sure. That is revolting. You get used to it, eventually you lose all sense of smell, which in my case was actually a medical improvement." She studied him for a long moment, then asked, "Is this what human warfare is? Improvised discomfort?" "Pretty much. We call it tactical suffering." It was only the first day, and already she had cataloged at least 16 flaws in human battle doctrine. He respected her intelligence. It was surgical, relentless, and frighteningly fast. But she lacked one key component: flexibility. Ophalari's strategy was beautiful, elegant, and precise. but it broke down when confronted with chaos. Thorn, on the other hand, thrived in chaos, mostly because he had no choice. That evening, over rehydrated noodles and a protein bar he claimed tasted like cow sadness, he asked her about her people's military structure. She explained the royal fleet in chilling detail: admirals born in gene vats, warships bonded to noble bloodlines, tactical AIs that sang battle songs in ancient dialects. And humans, she said, trained their soldiers with simulations involving colored foam projectiles. Don't knock it, he said. Paintball taught me more about betrayal than any classroom ever did. That night, she asked for a demonstration of a human ambush. He showed her how to use shadows, how to lure an enemy into a trap, how to confuse thermal sensors with boiling water and foil blankets. She watched, said nothing. Then, when he wasn't looking, she vanished. 3 seconds later, she had him in a hold, one elbow against his throat. "You are predictable," she said. "I was giving a demo." Lesson received. He coughed. "Okay, note to self. Never turn your back on alien monarchs or date one." Again the ear twitch. Again no stabbing. He called it a win. As the night deepened and the alien stars glittered like gossiping gods above them, Thorn sat on the edge of the outpost dome, watching her stand silently at the perimeter. She looked out at the alien horizon, unreadable. "Hey," he said softly, "do you ever miss it? Being back home?" She didn't answer right away. Then quietly she said, "My home is not a place I miss. It is a memory I defend." For once, Thorn didn't have a joke. Instead, he nodded just once and said, "I get that." The galaxy was wide. The peace was fragile. The enemy was probably already planning its next move. But in this moment, a soldier and a queen sat under foreign stars, teaching each other how not to fall apart. And maybe, just maybe, they were starting to trust each other. It turned out that teaching an alien queen how to lose gracefully was harder than surviving basic training in a low-orbit gravity simulator with a sinus infection. Queen Arvalai didn't do losing, not in sparring matches, not in simulations, not in holographic war games where the loser merely had to acknowledge a theoretical defeat. No, for her, even theoretical loss was unacceptable. So when Thorn trounced her in a strategic projection of the Battle of Taros 4, using nothing more than a supply of decoy drones and a thermal smokescreen, she stared at the rendered battlefield like it had just insulted her ancestry. That, she said icily, was cheating. "It was creative adaptation," Thorn replied, grinning around a protein stick that claimed to be beef but tasted suspiciously like regret. "Classic human maneuver. You'd be amazed what we can do with a tarp, 3 bungee cords, and blind optimism. Your logic is unsteady. You risk 90% casualties to secure a simulated warehouse full of non-essential munitions." Exactly. No one expects you to care about non-essential munitions. That's why we win. No one expects the dumb plan to work. She crossed her arms, silver gauntlets clicking softly, and muttered something in Ophalari that the translator caller refused to process. Thorn assumed it wasn't complimentary. Something about a snail's tactical brain. He didn't take offense. He had called her a cosmic glitter fork 2 days ago, and she'd only threatened to decapitate him once since then. Still, things were shifting. Their daily sessions had begun to take on a rhythm. She arrived precisely at 0600, already briefed and immaculately armored. He rolled in at 0615 with mismatched socks and a dubious mug of synthetic caffeine, usually muttering about sleep cycles and how if humans were meant to wake up this early, evolution would have come with a snooze button. But despite the banter and the insults, she listened now. She asked more questions. And once, when he explained the logic of flanking maneuvers with the help of 2 mugs and a spoon, she had actually smirked. Progress. The camp had adjusted too. The other humans had stopped watching their interactions with the subtle terror usually reserved for diplomatic minefields. The Ophalari guards, ever silent and dressed like interstellar vigilantes, had taken to observing Thorn's lessons with the faintest glimmer of curiosity. One even chuckled, just once, when Thorn face-planted during a demonstration of close-quarters evasion. He'd gotten his revenge later by rigging a bucket of powdered drink mix over the door to the command hut. The Ophalari did not appreciate fluorescent cherry dye in their royal headdresses. Worth it. Still, under the surface of their uneasy peace, something else was brewing, a tension not born from hostility, but from uncertainty. The galactic news feed was growing darker. Missing ships, scrambled coordinates, and encrypted broadcasts from the outer sectors. Something was moving out there. Something old. One night, as they sat inside the tactical simulator, watching a replay of human naval maneuvers, Thorne noticed her staring at the ship formations, distracted. "You good?" he asked, tossing her a snack bar she immediately refused. "You've got the look of someone realizing they left the oven on. In another galaxy." Arvali didn't look away from the projection. "There is a legend among my people," she said slowly, "of a warship built with the consciousness of an ancient queen, a dreadnought tied to the royal bloodline. It vanished during a civil insurrection, presumed lost in the Vortis Rift." "Yeah," Thorne said, popping the snack bar into his mouth. "That sounds like a bedtime story designed to give kids tactical nightmares." "Her name was Vale Wren," she continued, voice softer now. "My sister." Thorne froze mid-chew. "Wait, hold up. You've got sibling royalty with their own ghost ship?" "She was older, trained from birth to command the fleet. I was, the spare." Thorne blinked. Wow. Alien dynasties are just like ours, except with more plasma swords and less tabloid scandals. Probably. She finally turned toward him. "There have been signals, buried, scrambled, but the signature is unmistakable. It's hers, or the ship's." He sat back, letting that settle. "And you think she's back?" "I do not know, but if she is, if the Valorette lives, then the treaty is already a corpse waiting for someone to notice it stopped breathing." They didn't speak after that. The simulation flickered, then ended. The silence between them wasn't hostile. It was heavier than that, like the gravity had deepened. 2 days later, they tested a mock recon mission in the lower jungle to evaluate Arvali's adaptability to natural Earth terrain. She adapted immediately, scaling moss-coated trees with all the grace of a panther made of glass and vengeance. Thorne, on the other hand, slid down a slope and landed in a puddle that smelled suspiciously like fermented banana peel. "Humans," she said from above, voice dry as dust, "were clearly not designed for vertical environments." "Nope," he groaned, peeling a vine from his hair. "Just credit card debt and seasonal allergies." But when they reached the crest of the ridge, Arvali froze. There, crackling faintly on a forgotten relay tower, was a ping, a data burst. It wasn't human. It wasn't Xylox. And it bore the crest of the Ophalari Royal Fleet, one not seen in decades. "Decrypt it," she said. Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. Thorne accessed the tower, bypassed the security lock with a multi-tool, a spare fuse, and a prayer. The data came through distorted, but a phrase emerged from the static. "Queen Arvali, come home." The message ended. No coordinates, no timestamp. Just the echo of a ghost. Arvali stepped back, ears tense, eyes distant. "She's calling me." Thorne scratched his head. "Your undead sibling's psychic warship is sending interstellar voicemails." "Great. What could go wrong?" She looked at him then, a little too long, not in command, not in judgment, but in something closer to uncertainty. "You'll come with me," she said, not a question. He gave a tired smile. "Well, I wasn't planning on dying next week, but I guess I can squeeze it in." That night, under the artificial dome sky, they stood side by side, warrior and soldier, queen and joke machine, on the edge of something vast. War had taught them fear. Politics had taught them mistrust. But whatever lay ahead, it was going to need both of them. The shuttle they flew to the rim looked less like a starcraft and more like a rusted lunchbox with delusions of grandeur. Thorne had named it the Duckling, partly because of its wobble, mostly because it sounded less terrifying than Experimental Drop Transport 9B. When Arvali first saw it, her expression made it clear she thought it belonged in a museum dedicated to poor decisions. "This flies?" "Only when it's feeling brave," Thorne had replied, patting the hull affectionately. "Don't worry, I bribed the AI with a fresh memory card and the promise of a better pilot. It's working on forgiveness." And so, with questionable shielding, a cargo bay full of portable rations that expired last stardate, and a human soldier who hadn't shaved in 3 days, the Queen of the Ophalari and her accidental mentor set out for the last known ping from a ghost ship. The journey to the Vortis Rift was a slow crawl through the darker veins of space, where ancient navigation buoys blinked in half-sleep and radiation storms whispered rumors. Every now and then, their systems picked up scattered signals, Ophalari transmissions woven with encrypted coordinates. Thorn had to reroute power to keep the translator running, duct tape the life support back into obedience, and occasionally thump the control panel when it got philosophical. "You are certain this ship is stable?" Arvalai asked one evening as the duckling hiccuped through an asteroid belt. "Define stable," Thorn said, balancing a bowl of half-rehydrated noodles. "Emotionally? Spiritually? Structurally?" She narrowed her eyes. "You inspire neither clarity nor confidence. See, I'm consistently inconsistent." But as they neared the rift, the jokes became fewer. Space there didn't behave the way it should. Gravity curled like a bad memory. Light didn't scatter. It bent inward, like it was trying to hide something. The stars were too still, like they were waiting. And then it appeared. The Violates, a ship the size of a small moon, its hull black and gleaming with living metal, suspended in the edge of nothing. It had no running lights, no beacon, and yet it breathed. Slow, terrible, patient. The moment Arvalais saw it, she stood taller, as if a string in her bones had been pulled taut. "That's her," she whispered. "I can feel it." "Great," Thorn muttered, watching the reading spike. "I think it just felt me, and I don't think it liked what it touched." Docking was impossible. The ship didn't respond to any hails. So they took a smaller scout pod into the hull. Thorn with a stunner rifle he hadn't calibrated since the last ceasefire. Arvalais with her crystalline blade humming at her hip. Inside, the ship was silent. The corridors were sleek, organic, ribbed with pulsating light. It was like walking through the veins of a creature pretending to be steel. "I really hate sentient architecture," Thorn whispered. "You humans fear things you do not understand," Arvalai replied. "That's because the things we don't understand usually kill us. Quickly, or worse, slowly with paperwork." As they moved deeper, the ship reacted. Not hostile, not yet, but aware. Doors opened on their own. Lights followed them like curious eyes. And then they found her. In the central chamber, a vast cathedral of code and echo, a figure set upon a throne of fiber and memory. Tall, draped in armor darker than black, and crowned with living data. "Vale Ren," Arvali Braille. The queen opened her eyes. They spoke in a language Thorn's translator couldn't follow. Pure emotion wrapped in tone, like music shaped by war. Arvalai's voice cracked only once, and Thorn didn't ask what was said. He didn't need to. It became clear. Vale Ren had not died. She had merged with the ship, fled the civil war to preserve knowledge forbidden even to the Ophalari. But time had changed her. She was not just queen now. She was vessel, and she had plans. Vale Ren believed the galaxy was broken, ruled by short-sighted races, hobbled by treaties and fear. She wanted to restore order, her own version of it, one where logic ruled, where queens didn't have to share power with fragile species or clumsy humans. "You brought him," Vale Ren said, her voice echoing through the hull. "A soldier, a joke." Arvalai stepped forward. "He is my mentor. A human, a soldier who taught me more about leadership than any algorithm or bloodline." Vale Ren looked at Thorn, and for a moment he felt smaller than atoms. "You would defy your own legacy for this creature." Arvalai drew her blade. "Yes." Thorn, touched but slightly terrified, muttered, "You know, most people just write a nice review." Vale Ren rose from the throne. "Then you have chosen exile." Power surged. The ship roared to life. Systems awakened, engines churned. Vale Ren didn't need soldiers. She was the army. But Arvalai had learned chaos. Thorn deployed decoys, heat bombs, and EMPs calibrated to human tech. Signals Vale Ren hadn't adapted to. The ship convulsed. Arvalai attacked with swift, erratic strikes, unpredictable by her sister's pattern-trained reflexes. In the final moments, Thorne set the ship's core to overload, but not to destroy. To erase the AI pathways, sever the link. Valren screamed, a sound that felt like time unraveling. Then, silence. They escaped just before the ship imploded into a dormant husk. Floating in space, the two stared at the stars. "She's gone," Arvalai said quietly. "Yeah. She could have ruled everything." "Yeah, well, so could I. If I'd married rich." She turned to him, weary but smiling. "Thank you, Thorne McAllister." He shrugged. "Anytime. Just don't ask me to teach your next queen in training. I only have so many limbs." They returned to Virelon 6, not as queen and soldier, but as something stranger. Allies forged in rebellion, friends born of fire and tactical sarcasm. Arvalai no longer scoffed at human tactics. Thorne no longer flinched when he heard the word mentor. And when a new treaty was signed between their peoples, one not of obligation but of respect, they both stood there side by side. He wasn't the joke anymore. She wasn't the enemy. And for once, the galaxy laughed with them. The station hung like a rusted jewel in the black, its panels mismatched and its pulse flickering with erratic life, as if the old thing had been built by committee and maintained by suggestion. Space Station Orpheon had been called a marvel of interspecies cooperation when it launched 3 centuries ago. Now it was better known for its bars, its bribes, and its tendency to depress navigational AIs. Sirathel stood on the docking platform, posture straight, expression unreadable beneath the thin veil of blue-violet light humming from her eyes. She ignored the sharp, metallic tang of ionized air and the faint smell of fried engine coolant wafting from somewhere disturbingly close. She was Elendari, emissary of the House of Kevalix, guardian of the Ember Key, and profoundly regretting her decision to wear diplomatic armor instead of something more flexible, or at least easier to sit down in. A squat robot wheeled past her, screeching something that might have been obscenity in Binary 7, dragging a chain of sparking hover crates. Sira flinched. Humans had a word for this kind of place. Colorful, as in a colorful neighborhood, or his criminal record is very colorful. She tapped the interface pad on her wrist and scanned for the one person who might change the balance of intergalactic power and possibly misplace it under his pilot's seat. Cal Monroe, salvage runner, smuggler, former champion of the Zero-Grav beer pong tournament at the Centauri Fringe Games. His record was colorful, all right. Also scorched around the edges. "He's late," she muttered to herself in her native tongue, which sounded like wind whistling through crystal flutes. The wrist pad pulsed once. Cal's beacon had just arrived in orbit. 5 minutes ago. He was taking his time, which he did, always. Cal's ship, the wretched Optimism, docked with a dramatic hiss, followed by what could only be described as a mechanical groan. The airlock door didn't open so much as consider it, then grudgingly gave way with a sound that reminded Sira of a dying accordion. And then he stepped through. Human, average height, hair styled in what might have once been fashionable if someone had described fashion to him using only vague hand gestures. He wore a jacket stitched with patches from various planetary dive bars and one that read, "Don't panic, but also maybe panic." Cal spotted her immediately. "Hey, you must be my boss," he said, offering a 2-finger salute that was either military or the universal sign for "I'm winging it." Sira stared at him. "You're late." He grinned. "Technically, I'm early. In certain time zones. Very certain. Mostly theoretical. I had you briefed with exact coordinates, time, and purpose." "I read most of it," he said. "The part with the bonus was very compelling." Sira inhaled slowly through her nose. "You are to transport this object," she said, lifting a cylindrical container from her belt. It glowed with a steady inner light, softly pulsing like a heartbeat. "You are not to open it, not to tamper with it, not to shake it to see if it rattles." "I'm very professional," Cal said. "Once delivered a barrel of experimental algae wine to the High Bishop of Frontax 7. Only drank 1 bottle on the way. This is not wine." Then the job just got less fun. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "This device is known as the Ember Key. It can activate a relic network older than your species' written history. It controls a system of wormholes known as the Veil Array. It is powerful, volatile, and incredibly valuable. Cal blinked. So, definitely don't sell it to that guy who offered me a hoverbike and a signed hollow poster of Lady Scarblade. Sierra just handed him the device. It is encoded to respond only to the DNA of the designated courier. That is you. Somehow. Fate, Cal said, or very sloppy bureaucracy. She didn't smile, but something in her gaze softened, briefly like starlight behind passing cloud. You will deliver it to the vault node in the charred halo. There it will be received by my allies. And if I fail, don't. Got it, he said, slipping the ember key into his satchel. Any chance you want to come along? I make a mean space chili. One time it didn't even explode. Sierra tilted her head, ears twitching ever so slightly. You are joking. Only sort of. She turned, cloak catching the artificial breeze as she walked toward the edge of the platform. The future of my people depends on you, Cal Monroe. Try not to die. No promises, he said cheerfully, but I'll do my best. He turned on his heel and strode back toward the wretched optimism, whistling a tune he probably thought was charming and probably wasn't. Sierra watched him go, unease curling low in her stomach. She had read his file 3 times. Every line of it screamed liability. Every instinct told her to choose someone else. But every prophecy, and Elendari didn't take prophecy lightly, had pointed to him. Not to a soldier, not to a diplomat, to this reckless, grinning human with a crooked smile and an even more crooked flight path. Back aboard his ship, Cal settled into the pilot's chair, tossing the ember key onto the dashboard beside a half-eaten protein bar and a pair of novelty sunglasses. All right, mysterious artifact of immense galactic consequence, he said. Let's get you where you're going. The ship lurched sideways as he fired the engines, then spun twice before stabilizing. Probably. As the wretched optimism blasted off into the ink-streaked black of space, Sierra stood in silence, eyes fixed on the fading trail. The stars did not blink, but she felt watched anyway. The choices made today could not be unmade tomorrow. She had done her part, trusted her judgment, trusted the signs. Still, deep in her mind, a small whisper twisted like solar wind through asteroid fields. You've made a mistake. But by the time she acknowledged it, the man and the key were already too far from recall. If Cal Monroe had known he was on the verge of triggering an ancient galactic transportation network that hadn't been active since before the Great Spiral War, or possibly a really big cosmic oops, he might have at least put on pants. Instead, he was halfway through a space shower, humming the theme to an old Earth sitcom while trying to fish a piece of soap out of zero-G suspension. The ship AI, which he had named Janice after a girl who once punched him in 6th grade and left a lasting impression in both his memory and his jaw, interrupted him with a cheerful ping. Captain, Janice chirped in her overly enthusiastic tone, you appear to have activated the Ember Key. Cal blinked, suspended mid-spin, water droplets orbiting his head like confused planets. I what now? Ember Key active, Veil Array initializing, subspace destabilization, in progress. Also, you're out of toothpaste. Cal flailed toward the console, still dripping and wrapped in a towel featuring a cartoon kraken. The glowing cylinder he'd left on the dash was no longer content with a soft hum. It was now thrumming, vibrating slightly, and emitting a faint tone not unlike an ancient choir whispering secrets and recipes in reverse Latin. He poked it. The lights in the ship dimmed. Bad idea, he muttered, yanking his hand back. The ship's main viewer blinked on to reveal a swirling rift opening ahead. It was like staring into a whirlpool made of light, thought, and mild existential crisis. Through it, he could see other rifts blooming like flowers in hyperspace, connecting planets, stations, ships, some even rerouting around entire stars. Traffic patterns warped, time signatures buckled. Somewhere, a lonely space trucker's coffee mug spilled in slow motion. Oh no, Cal whispered. I broke space. You have, Janice confirmed brightly. On the plus side, your credit score has not changed. Not helping, Janice. Back on Orphean Station, Sirathel watched her comms panel flash with a cascade of emergency pings from every major sector in the Accord. Fleets were rerouting without orders. Trade lines were vanishing into nowhere. Pirate havens were colliding with peace delegations. Someone had opened a wormhole inside a luxury resort's infinity pool. She didn't need to check the data twice. "Cal Monroe," she hissed, and launched herself toward the nearest dock. Aboard the wretched Optimism, Cal attempted to steer the ship clear of the expanding rift. He threw switches he didn't understand and yelled at panels like they owed him money. The ship lurched sideways, backwards, possibly sideways and backwards, a feat only achievable under very specific violations of physics. "I didn't do it on purpose," he shouted as sparks flew from the console. "You sneezed on the ember key," Janice noted helpfully. "It was a powerful sneeze." Suddenly, the key pulsed with light. The ship jerked. Cal was thrown against the ceiling again, and then everything went still. Not quiet, not silent, just still, in that ominous way that suggested reality was taking a moment to think things over. The stars outside no longer looked right. They were too close together, too far apart. Some were blinking in Morse code. One had a distinctly judgmental glint. "Where are we?" Cal asked. They entered the core chamber together. The room was circular, ringed by jagged spire, and at its center sat a dais shaped like a flower in bloom. Above it, the air shimmered like a bubble of reality, trying very hard to keep its act together. Sierra handed him the ember key. Cal took it carefully, the glow matching his pulse now. Steady, sure, almost, serene. He stepped onto the dais, and the universe blinked. The vault responded instantly. Light poured from the floor. Symbols floated in the air, rearranging into patterns that seemed to test him. Memories, regrets, tiny moments he hadn't thought about in years. That one time he faked a customs form for an entire shipment of singing fish. The fight with his brother over their parents' old ship. The night he almost left the smuggling life behind, then didn't. Sierra watched in silence as the light encased him, wrapping around his frame like woven starlight. She felt the veil array responding, paths aligning, folding in, trying to understand this wild, impulsive human it had, for reasons unknown to science or sense, chosen as its wielder. Cal's voice when it came was quiet. "I see it. I see everywhere." "You're stabilizing it," Sierra said. "You're repairing the network." "No, not just repairing." His eyes opened, glowing with the key's light. "It's more than that. It's asking what it should be now. It wants a new directive." She stepped forward carefully. "Then tell it. Guide it." There was silence then. "No more empires," Cal said. "No more control. Just freedom. Let people move. Let them choose. No gates. No tolls. Just stars." The vault shivered. The light pulsed and then slowly the key dimmed. The dais sank back into the floor, and the ancient hum stopped. Sierra exhaled. "It's done," he said, blinking away the light. "The veil array. It's open for everyone. Anyone with a ship can jump now. No more gatekeepers." Sierra nodded slowly. "Then we've done more than save it. We've changed the shape of civilization." Cal grinned. All in a day's work for a guy who once tried to bribe a customs officer with glow-in-the-dark socks. They left the vault in silence, watching the cosmos twist around them, rifts now flowing like veins of silver across the void. News would spread fast. Accords would crumble, yes, but others would form. Trade would flourish. Smugglers would get honest jobs. Well, some smugglers. Maybe. Sierra turned to him as the station faded behind them. "You are not what I expected." "Most people say that," Cal said, "usually right before I crash into something. But I understand now why the key chose you." He raised a brow. "Really?" "Yes. You're reckless, undisciplined, irritating, unpolished. I'm starting to regret asking. And unpredictable, which is what the future needs. Not another bureaucrat. Someone who can imagine something better." Cal looked at her a long moment. "That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." She shrugged. "It's a low bar." Back on Orphean Station, things were different. Sierra was no longer just an emissary. She was the Elandari representative to the newly forming Vale Compact, a multi-species council founded not on power or borders, but shared access. An idea Cal had sparked without fully meaning to. He, meanwhile, had finally upgraded his ship's coffee maker and given Janice a new voice. British accent, very dignified. She now refused to acknowledge any past interactions that weren't properly logged. They kept in touch. Sometimes worked together, sometimes fought, sometimes argued over who owed who lunch after the last mission, always over dumplings. But one quiet night, floating just outside the Saturn drift, they shared a drink under the soft aurora of the ring belt. Cal handed her a dented flask. She took it with a smirk. "To the galaxy," he said. "To the mistake," she corrected. "The mistake?" "You, but a lucky one," he laughed. "I'll drink to that." The stars burned above them, paths wide open, the veil humming softly through space like an old song rediscovered. And somewhere in the deepest corners of the cosmos, the Ember Key rested once more, silent but aware, waiting not for a ruler, but for a traveler who saw the universe not as a map to be conquered, but as a story still being written. The docking bay smelled like burnt ozone, old socks, and bureaucracy. The kind of place where ships came to die, deals came to unravel, and travelers came to regret their decisions. Halen Prime called itself a trade outpost, but it was more of a cosmic junk drawer, filled with things you forgot you owned and didn't want to touch barehanded. She stepped off the ship in silence, long coat trailing behind her like a shadow that had forgotten how to cling. The coat was a gift from a trader she'd saved once on Vega 7, who'd insisted she take it as payment. It was 6 sizes too large and smelled faintly of cheese, but it hid her well. More importantly, it hid them from her. The stares, the whispers, the not-so-quiet remarks. "Is that one of the pointy-eared ones?" "No, too tall." "She's Elandari, I think. You can tell by the ears. They curve like a harp." "Ugly harp." She kept walking. Step, step, breathe. She wasn't sure when silence had become her armor, but it fit better than anything else these days. Words led to questions. Questions led to memories. And memories, well, they had sharp edges. At the far end of the hangar, a man leaned against a stack of magnetic cargo crates, arms crossed, expression set to mildly unimpressed. He looked like the kind of soldier who hadn't worn a pressed uniform in a decade, but still had the nerve to salute you sarcastically. A jagged scar ran from his temple to the edge of his jaw like a misplaced comma, and his left eye was cybernetic, glowing faint blue under the low lighting, flickering every so often, like it couldn't quite decide whether to pay attention. "Name's Cam Wren," he said with a nod that was either greeting or acknowledgement of existential despair. "You're the specialist?" She raised an eyebrow. "You sound disappointed." "I was hoping for someone taller. I can stand on a crate if it'll help." A beat. Then he grinned, and for the first time in what felt like years, she didn't feel like someone had stuck a pin in her chest just for walking into a room. They moved out together toward the mission briefing hub, where someone with too many stripes and not enough common sense explained the job. Escort a high-priority relic, something old, weird, and glowing faintly with power that defied known physics, through 4 unstable wormholes to a secure site on Lyra 4. "Cultural significance," the officer said. "Delicate material. Do not shake the container." "Is it alive?" Cam asked, scratching the back of his neck. "It was once." Cam turned to her. "Great. So we're babysitting Schrodinger's soul jar." She didn't laugh. Not yet. But she almost did. A flicker of something warmer than indifference stirred at the edge of her mouth. Maybe he saw it. Maybe he didn't. He kept talking anyway. The vessel they were assigned to was named the Jubilant Error, a name that inspired precisely zero confidence. It was held together with ductile memory tape, prayer, and what she suspected might be stubbornness in liquid form. Its AI introduced itself as regret, then added, "Don't worry, that's just my name. My function is to minimize yours." They boarded without ceremony, Cam tossing his gear down in the nearest unclaimed bunk while she wandered toward the cockpit, fingers brushing the control panel like she could read the ship's history in scratches and carbon scoring. She always did that. touch first, speak later. Machines didn't flinch when you looked at them wrong. By mid-cycle, they were underway, the first wormhole crackling into view like a wound in space trying desperately not to bleed. It shimmered in unnatural hues, colors you couldn't name and weren't sure you were supposed to see. Regret hummed nervously as they crossed the event threshold. I once dated a wormhole navigator, Cam offered casually as their ship buckled and screamed like an upset dragon. Tried to impress her by learning fifth-dimensional math. Didn't go well. How'd it end? I proposed. She calculated the statistical probability of our long-term success. Told me we had a 3.7% chance of mutual happiness. She glanced at him, arching one long brow. I said I liked those odds. She said she liked prime numbers better. The ship lurched violently, and for a second they both grabbed onto the same rail. Their hands touched. Her fingers were colder than expected. His grip was warm and calloused. Neither let go immediately. They emerged on the other side into the empty maw of space. Calm now. Quiet again. The silence didn't feel so heavy. In the days that followed, they encountered the usual interstellar obstacles. Rogue patrols, gravitational anomalies, and a customs check-in operated by sentient slugs with a bureaucratic kink. One demanded to see her identification, sniffed, then handed it back with the comment, "Oh dear, that's unfortunate." "Which part?" she asked. "The photo," the slug replied. "You should smile more." She nearly incinerated the booth with her glare. Cam diffused the moment by smuggling out a packet of snack cubes shaped like earth cats. "Emergency cuteness ration," he explained, "for when people are irredeemable." She accepted one. It tasted like chalk and betrayal, but it helped. They talked more after that, slowly, cautiously, like strangers stuck in the same escape pod. She learned he'd grown up on a terraform colony that had failed 3 times before succeeding. He learned she'd been cast out before she could even prove herself. He didn't flinch when she told him the Elendari had rules about symmetry and aesthetics. Didn't recoil when she said she'd been tested, measured, and found visually insufficient. "They're idiots," he said simply. "And you're a philosopher." "No, I just have working eyes." She turned away so he wouldn't see her face twist. But the warmth lingered. Not a fire, just an ember. But she remembered what fire felt like. On the 4th night of transit, during a lull between emergency system repairs and rerouted flight paths, Cam found her in the observation bay, staring out at a swirl of cosmic dust illuminated by twin suns. He leaned on the railing beside her, arms folded, his voice low. "You know, you're beautiful." It hit like a disruptor blast, not because of the words themselves, but because he meant them. Not as flattery, not as some half-hearted attempt at camaraderie. He'd said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. She barked a laugh, sudden and rough and startled even to her. "You're terrible at lying." "I'm terrible at lots of things," he said, "but I'm very good at noticing beauty." She shook her head, lips twitching, fighting off a smile like it might cost her something. "You're lucky I'm not the violent type." "Oh, I'm very unlucky," he said deadpan. "But at least now I'll die knowing I was honest." The galaxy stretched before them, dangerous, chaotic, and unwritten, and for the first time in a very long while, she didn't feel quite so alone. The second wormhole greeted them like a drunk uncle at a family reunion. Loud, unpredictable, and full of chaotic energy that smelled faintly of burnt lithium. Regret, their semi-depressed ship AI, gave them a warning that was half helpful, half existential crisis. "Wormhole stability at 62%, it said. Probability of successful passage, 79.4%. Probability of retaining your original number of limbs, 63.1%. Estimated regret, high." "Great," Cam muttered, strapping himself in. "Just how I like my chances. Slightly better than a coin toss and a dash of existential dread." She didn't reply. She was already at the navigation console, fingers flying across the haptic interface, plotting a course that danced between collapsing gravitational nodules and debris fields, held together by magnetic spite. Her ears twitched slightly, a sign he'd learned meant she was focusing hard or suppressing the urge to kill something. Possibly both. They slid into the wormhole with a sound like reality being crumpled and reassembled by someone on a caffeine high. Stars bent sideways. Light turned into spirals. Time flickered like a damaged light panel. Cam closed his eyes and thought about puppies. Specifically, puppies in tiny spacesuits. It helped. They emerged with only minor injuries. Cam's pride and regret's last coolant duct, which hissed mournfully. She stood immediately, scanned the sensor logs, and froze. The cargo pulsed. Cam blinked. Pulsed? She nodded. Once. Rhythmic. Like a heartbeat. Well, that's horrifying. The cargo, sealed in a quantum-stabilized vault buried in the engine room, was now glowing faintly through its casing. It was cube-shaped, etched with runes that shimmered in patterns she recognized from old Alindari text. Ones not taught anymore. Ones that usually meant things like ascension or collapse. She frowned. This wasn't supposed to activate. You're saying the ancient alien artifact we're transporting with no backup plan is doing something unpredictable? Cam asked. Shocking. They descended into the cargo bay, where the artifact pulsed again, like a giant metal heart trying to remember how to beat. She approached cautiously, reaching out, not touching, just sensing. There was a hum, low, steady, familiar in a way that scratched at the back of her mind like an old memory that refused to stay buried. It's trying to communicate, she said. Cam tilted his head. With what? Possibly me. Well, that's flattering. She shot him a look. He raised his hands. Hey, I'm just saying. If a galaxy-old piece of alien tech starts flirting, I want to be emotionally prepared. But he stepped back when she knelt by the vault, closed her eyes and reached deeper. Not with her hands, but with the part of her that still clung to her Elandari birthright. Her people had always had a kind of resonance with certain relics. Living tech, they called it. Machines that didn't just function, but felt. And this one felt her. It showed her flashes, visions pressed against her mind like memories not her own. A city of light built in symmetry so perfect it hurt to look at. A child standing alone on the outskirts, her ears too long, her features asymmetrical. Voices saying, outlier, flawed, exiled. She jerked away, breath caught in her throat. You okay? Cam was closer now, crouched beside her, his voice softer than she expected. It's not just a relic, it's a key, a tool, a judge. He raised an eyebrow. Well, that doesn't sound ominous at all. She looked at him, eyes dark with knowledge she hadn't wanted to remember. The mirror pulse doesn't show what you are. It shows what others see when they look at you. And if it stays on long enough, it makes that perception real. Cam stared at the cube, then at her, then back. So it's like a cosmic review aggregator, but instead of stars, it alters your existence based on public opinion. More or less. Ugh, it's like high school, but with worse consequences. She tried not to smile. She failed just a little. They secured the vault again, reinforced it with 4 layers of null energy mesh, and debated whether or not to warn command. Cam voted no. If we tell them it's active, they'll pull us out and send in a science team full of egos and clipboards. You ever seen what happens when 6 scientists argue over a relic? It's like watching cats fight in a zero-gravity bathroom. She had not, but the image was vivid. They agreed to continue. Carefully, quietly. But nothing stayed quiet for long. They were 5 hours from the next wormhole when they were intercepted. A small cruiser dropped out of fold space, weapons locked, engines humming a frequency that meant business. The hull was marked with crimson glyphs, Terran lords, rogue faction, military rejects, war profiteers, in general disappointments with good aim and no manners. Hail incoming, regret intoned, translating aggressive posturing and overcompensation into galactic standard. The screen lit up with a broad-shouldered man in armor, too shiny for comfort and a smile too practiced to trust. This is Captain Ril Tark of the Honor Fang. You are carrying a device of ancient power. We want it. Kindly surrender, and we'll only mildly obliterate you. Cam rolled his eyes. Honor Fang? That sounds like a dentist's nightmare. Stall him, she said, already tapping into the ship's defense overrides. Cam leaned in toward the screen. Sorry, did you say surrender? Funny story. We already tried that once. Gave up to some vending machines on Hadros 9. They made us fight to the death over a burrito. Captain Tark blinked. Are you mocking me? No, Cam said. This is just how we communicate. It's part of our charm. The enemy opened fire. Regret screamed. The ship jolted, lights flickering. Panels burst. She hit the deck, rolled, came up shooting. Plasma rounds lit the corridor as boarders spilled in through breach pods. She moved like lightning bottled in a body, silent, deadly, graceful even when killing. Cam followed, covering her back, shouting obscenities that might have been battle cries or breakfast orders. By the time the last boarder dropped, Cam was bleeding from the shoulder. She was scorched along her ribs, and the vault was humming again. They sat in the corridor, breathing hard. Blood and oil pooled between them. That, Cam said, was not how I wanted to spend this afternoon. I thought you liked surprises. I like birthday surprises, not death ambushes from narcissistic space pirates. She leaned her head back against the wall, eyelids fluttering. Still think I'm beautiful? She asked, voice hoarse. He looked at her, really looked. The smudges of ash, the crack in her lip, the gleam of strange light beneath her skin. Especially now. And for a second, the hum of the mirror pulse matched the rhythm of her heart. The final wormhole loomed before them, a spiraling wound in space that pulsed like a living thing with indigestion. The ship, bruised and battered, groaned with every maneuver, its hull held together by patches of willpower and emergency sealant that smelled vaguely of burnt pickles. Regret's voice crackled through the bridge speakers like an old friend trying to whisper gossip from across a crowded bar. Entering this wormhole has a 92% success rate. However, the remaining 8% may involve spontaneous musical numbers or emotional revelations. Proceed at your own risk, Cam chuckled, his shoulder still wrapped in a makeshift sling made from one of his socks. Honestly, I'd prefer a musical number over another pirate boarding. She didn't answer right away. She was at the controls again, her hands steady despite the phantom ache in her ribs. The mirror pulse hadn't acted up since the last attack, but she could still feel it, waiting, watching, whispering in a voice only she could hear. Not words exactly, more like a question. Who are you now? They entered the wormhole. This one was different, wilder, more sentient. It twisted around them, and not just their ship, around them, their thoughts, their fears. Space bent, and so did reality. She saw flashes again, but not just from the artifact. These came from her own mind, dredged up by the wormhole's merciless pull. She saw herself as a child, ears too long, standing in front of a mirrored wall in an Elendari academy. Students whispered. Adults avoided eye contact. The instructor had said she was exceptionally capable, but tragically aesthetic. It had felt like someone had tried to compliment a malfunctioning toaster. Next to her, Cam was watching his own montage. She saw it play in the flicker of his eyes. Battlefields, laughter. The moment he realized he was good at surviving, but terrible at staying. One hand drifted toward hers, not grabbing, not pressing, just there. A tether. They emerged on the other side intact, which, given their history, felt like winning the galactic lottery. The secure facility on Lyra 4 glowed beneath them, sterile white domes nestled in an Arctic valley. The scientists who greeted them wore layered coats and tired eyes and took the cargo with reverent caution. Your mission is complete, one said, clipboard in hand. Payment transferred, debrief scheduled. Cam, never one for formalities, squinted. So, we just hand over the cosmic mood cube and go home? That's the procedure. She watched the vault disappear into the hands of men who would study it, dissect it, never understand it. The hum in her chest dulled. She'd thought there'd be more at the end. Fireworks, revelation, a parade with alien confetti, and maybe a complimentary therapy session. Instead, they sat in the hangar, alone with lukewarm coffee and silence. You miss it already, Cam said. No, she lied. He sipped the coffee, made a face. They should use this stuff as a chemical weapon. She looked at him. Really looked, beyond the jokes and the slouch and the sarcasm. He'd nearly died more than once because of this job. Because of her. He never once blamed her. Never once looked away from her ears, her scars, her silence. I was trained to hide, she said quietly. Taught that being unseen was safer. That if I couldn't be accepted, I should at least be invisible. Cam set the cup down. You're terrible at invisible. I'm trying to be worse at it. A pause, then he smiled. Good. Start with yelling at someone. It's very cathartic. She did later, when a transport officer tried to charge her double because he didn't trust Elendari math. She gave him a verbal dismantling so clinical it left Cam applauding, and the officer blinking like he'd just been audited by a deity. Their ship, the Jubilant Error, was repaired enough to limp back into deep space. Regret had updated its software and was slightly more optimistic, at least in the way a sentient AI could fake enthusiasm. Where to now? Cam asked as they launched. She looked out at the stars, each one a place that had once rejected her. Each one now a maybe. I want to find the others, she said. Cam raised an eyebrow. Others? There are more like me. Outliers, misfits, thrown away by a galaxy obsessed with symmetry. I want to find them. He leaned back in the pilot's seat, kicking his boots up. Sounds like a terrible idea. She smiled. You're coming anyway. He smirked. Obviously, someone has to make sure you don't become a cult leader with really long speeches. And so they set course, toward uncertainty, toward danger, toward places where forgotten people waited to be reminded they mattered. She didn't wear silence like armor anymore. She wore her scars, her ears, her voice, and when someone asked who she was, she didn't whisper. She looked them in the eye and said, I'm the one who wasn't supposed to be beautiful, and I'm still here. Behind her, the mirror pulse, now dormant, sealed away, remained quiet. But if it could have spoken, it might have said, now you see her, and more importantly, now she sees herself. The wind on Proxima 9 didn't blow so much as it sulked. It was the kind of wind that had long ago given up on being dramatic and now just wandered the wastelands making sarcastic howling sounds, like a tired ghost too cynical to haunt anything properly. Dust swirled in lazy spirals across the bone-dry plains, catching on the scorched metal ribs of abandoned outposts, broken drones, and the occasional caution sign that read, Do not anger the local wildlife. Underneath it, someone had scrawled, Too late. Above this pleasant hellscape hovered the Scarab of Vex, a Varelian Dominion warship shaped like an ancient beetle, polished black with streaks of violet plasma veins glowing beneath its shell. It didn't so much cast a shadow as a warning. If ships had personalities, this one would definitely be the type to file a complaint against your existence. And at its helm stood Commander Thalyara, third-born of the fire-fused Clade, undefeated in 17 duels, former ambassador to the Black Nebula, and, at present, mildly irritated. She stood still as stone, arms behind her back, posture impossibly perfect, and gaze locked on the planetary scan interface. The screen pulsed red over a pinpoint location labeled, Human Resistance Outpost, possibly armed with sharp sticks. She squinted. Is this a joke? Her adjutant, a nervous, gelatinous blob named Skern, quivered beside her. No, Commander. That's the actual tactical assessment. Thalyara exhaled sharply through her nose. I have subjugated planets whose species communicate by sneezing on rocks. I once dueled a 7-limbed assassin in zero gravity while both of us were on fire. And you're telling me my next opponent, my only opponent, is a human armed with optimism and pointy wood. Skern let out a wet gurgle that might have been a shrug. He is reported to be resilient. Oh, marvelous, Thalyara muttered. So's fungus. But orders were orders, even for legends. She was to engage and eliminate the last known human combatant holding ground on this dust ball, then return for debriefing and perhaps a well-earned stasis nap. The mission should take no more than 20 minutes, most of which would be spent navigating the planet's erratic gravity wells and trying not to trip over human refuse. Gods, the humans, and their cans. She turned, her long silver coat fluttering like a villain's cape in a discount opera. Prepare my descent pod. I'll make this quick. Shall I prime your plasma blades, Commander? Number, I'll use the anti-grav halberd. It's more dramatic. Besides, she let a sly smile curl her lips. If this human is anything like the rest, it'll be over before he finishes whatever tragically bland last words he's chosen. On the surface, Rex Halverson was just finishing his third protein bar of the day. It tasted like loneliness and sawdust, which was about par for space rations. He leaned back against a rusted hull plate and looked up at the sky, where something shiny and beetle-shaped was starting its descent. "Oh, good," he muttered, unwrapping another bar. "Company." He checked his weapon, a hybrid assault rifle built from standard Earth military tech and whatever alien scrap he could fit together with chewing gum and brute force. It clicked, buzzed, and emitted a high-pitched whine that probably wasn't healthy, but it worked, mostly, depending on the temperature, and the phase of the moon, and whether he'd kicked it hard enough that morning. Rex wasn't anyone's idea of a hero. He had a 5 o'clock shadow that refused to leave, even in different time zones. His armor was dented, half-painted with a red stripe that used to be symbolic of something before it faded into oblivion. And his tactical visor had long since broken, so he'd replaced it with a pair of aviators and a lot of hope. The pod hit ground like a comet having a temper tantrum. Dust exploded outward, and from within the glowing debris stepped the most confusingly attractive threat Rex had ever seen. She looked mostly human, 2 arms, 2 legs, good hair day, but with long, elegantly curved ears that gave her the air of a sci-fi elf who moonlighted as a dominatrix. Her armor shimmered like someone had dipped obsidian in a black hole, and her halberd hovered beside her, like an obedient, murderous puppy. Rex lowered his gun a notch. "You come in peace, or is that halberd thing just for show?" Talyara cocked her head. "I come for conquest." He pointed at the wasteland behind him. "You might want to conquer something with plumbing first." She stepped closer, the ground sizzling under her boots. "You are Rex Halverson?" "Yup. You are the last human defender of this outpost. Last one stupid enough to stay, yeah. You understand that resisting the Dominion is futile?" Rex looked at the horizon, where a storm was brewing with all the subtlety of a frat party. "Yeah, we get that a lot. Doesn't seem to stop us." She took a ready stance, halberd glowing. "Prepare yourself," he smirked. "For what? An overdramatic laser show?" She lunged. He rolled. The first clash was not poetic. It was loud, clumsy, and involved Rex throwing a rock and shouting, "Distraction!" as he ducked behind a crate. Talyara sliced the crate in half. He fired his weapon and missed completely, but managed to shoot the rock he'd thrown, which somehow exploded. Neither of them knew why. Probably faulty alien chemistry. For several minutes, their battle looked like a cross between a circus act and a bar fight on Mars. She was fast, precise, deadly. He was unpredictable, sarcastic, and surprisingly hard to hit. At one point, she paused. "Your tactics make no sense." "Good," Rex said, ducking another swing. "If they made sense, you'd win." She narrowed her eyes. "You're improvising." "Yup, with trash. Hey, it's resourceful trash." And then somehow he knocked her off balance. Not with strength, but by kicking a loose panel under her feet that flipped her like a coin. She landed hard, stunned more by the audacity than the impact. Rex stood over her, breathless. "You okay?" "I think your pride broke its ankle." Talyara blinked up at him. For a moment her lips twitched. Not a smile. Never that. But maybe the prelude to one. She rose slowly. "This will take longer than 20 minutes, she muttered. Rex shrugged. "Yeah, sorry. I'm a bit of a slow burn." The second skirmish began with an insult and ended with a small explosion involving a vending machine. No one could say exactly how they got there. Not Talyara, not Rex, and certainly not the vending machine, which had stood for years in solemn silence, offering melted chocolate bars and expired soda to the occasional unlucky scavenger. But now it was the newest casualty in a war of attrition and sarcasm. They were deep inside the ruins of the old Terran outpost now, a broken skeleton of metal corridors and half-lit control rooms. The walls hummed with failing energy lines, and somewhere in the distance, an emergency klaxon continued to scream as if it too had forgotten what it was warning about. Talyara stalked forward, silent as a wraith, her halberd floating at her side with quiet menace. She had switched tactics. Gone were the grand, sweeping strikes and dramatic flourishes. Now she was methodical, efficient, lethal. Her armor adapted, lightened, microplasma seams sealing over previous damage, her movement almost noiseless. She was a shadow with a death wish, and Rex was her very noisy, very underprepared prey. He popped his head out from behind a collapsed medbay door, chewing the same stick of gum he'd been working on for an hour. "You know," he called out, "you've got great form. Graceful. Deadly. Very Cirque du Murder." A bolt of purple plasma tore through the air where his head had been. "Just a compliment," he shouted as he ducked. From above, Thalyara dropped like a hawk, her boots magnetizing briefly to the metal wall before she launched forward in a perfect arc. Halberd spinning like a comet's tail. Rex yelped and barely rolled out of the way, colliding with a terminal that sparked in protest. "You mock me to hide your fear," she said as she landed, eyes glowing faintly from her neural enhancement field. "A transparent tactic." Rex groaned as he picked himself up. "Lady, I mock everything. I mocked a supernova once. It didn't laugh either." They clashed again, but this time it was tighter, more focused. Thalyara's blade sliced through the air with surgical precision, humming with suppressed force fields. Rex countered with a makeshift shield cobbled together from a plasma door panel and a frying pan. It clanged and sizzled under the hits, each impact rattling his bones and probably shortening his lifespan. She knocked him back, sent him skidding across the floor. He crashed into the aforementioned vending machine, which promptly whirred, beeped, and dropped a single can of something labeled Physium, now with 300% more quantum bubbles, onto his chest. "Well," Rex muttered, dazed, "at least I won something." Thalyara stood over him, halberd poised for a killing blow. Her breathing was even, her stance perfect. And yet she hesitated. "You're still joking," she said quietly. "Why?" "Because if I start crying, it'll get in my eyes and I need those." She studied him. "You are the last of your squad. Your species has lost the war. You have no reinforcements, no exit strategy, and no chance of victory. Technically, I still have a half-charged laser toothbrush, so don't count me out yet." She should have ended it. It would have been clean, efficient, honor-bound. But something in her hesitated, not from mercy but from confusion. She had studied human warfare, their patterns, their tactics, their predictability. And Rex Halverson defied every metric. He fought like someone with nothing to lose, but his eyes told a different story. There was something behind them. Grief, yes, but also purpose. Not vengeance, not desperation. Purpose. A ridiculous, unquantifiable thing that Dominion strategists referred to in briefing notes as emotional inconsistency, species, human. "Why do you keep fighting?" she asked, halberd still raised. "Why not run? Surrender? Accept extinction with dignity?" Rex sat up slowly, rubbing his ribs. "Because running would mean I agree with you." "With me?" "That humanity's finished, that we're just meat and mistakes, that this planet, and everyone I lost on it, doesn't matter." He picked up the Physium can and examined it. "Plus, if I die, no one will ever know how terrible this stuff tastes." Thalyara frowned. She stepped back. Her armor receded slightly at the neck, exposing more of her skin to the cooler air. A gesture not of vulnerability, but curiosity. "You think your spirit outweighs our evolution? That emotion can overcome thousands of years of engineered superiority?" "No," Rex said, standing. "I think spirit and emotion are evolution. Just the kind you can't download into a brain or wrap in exo-armor." She watched him walk to the terminal and begin typing something into a broken interface. "What are you doing?" "Pulling up some files." "For what?" "For later, in case I die and someone finds this place." Thalyara tilted her head. "A message to your species?" He glanced at her. "Number A mixtape. I promised someone I'd finish it." There was a silence between them then, awkward, bizarre, and completely unbefitting of a battlefield. Thalyara didn't lower her weapon, but she didn't strike either. "You're very strange," she said. "And you're very tall," he replied. "It balances out." From somewhere deeper in the outpost, a structural alarm began to beep. The battle, as it turned out, had compromised a few key supports. The ceiling creaked ominously. I suggest we vacate, Thalyara said. You suggesting a ceasefire? A temporary pause, she said, eyeing the ceiling, until we're not crushed. I like my bones unpancaked, Rex said. Let's roll. They ran together through crumbling corridors, dodging debris and arguing about the proper pronunciation of quasar as if they were longtime colleagues instead of sworn enemies. At one point, Rex had to boost her through a collapsing vent. She returned the favor by catching him mid-fall with a tractor field and grumbling, "Your mass is inconvenient." "Thanks," he replied, panting. "It's the snacks." They emerged into the open air, covered in soot, bruised, bleeding, and entirely too close to laughing. Thalyara turned to face him. "You fight differently from any human I've encountered." "I'll take that as a compliment." "It's not meant as one." "Still taking it." She stared at him for a long moment. Then, without a word, she activated her communicator and vanished in a shimmer of violet light, leaving only the faintest ripple in the air. Rex stood alone, blinking. "I think I impressed her," he said to the dust. The vending machine exploded behind him, as if to disagree. There were two suns in the sky that day, one angry, one indifferent, and both were doing a spectacular job of trying to bake Rex Halverson into a meat-flavored crisp. He squinted up at them from the shade of a half-toppled radar array and decided for the third time that morning that Proxima 9 really needed a moon, or a cloud, or literally anything resembling comfort. He had fashioned a rough camp on the outskirts of the outpost's wreckage, where the wind had the decency to blow inconsistently, and the air didn't taste entirely like burnt circuitry. It had been 3 days since Thalyara vanished in a flash of shimmering teleportation, leaving him with bruised ribs, a half-loaded rifle, and more questions than answers. But she hadn't killed him. That had to count for something. He'd passed the time rebuilding the terminal system with spare parts, reprogramming old drones to bring him salvage supplies, and, more importantly, cataloging the contents of the vending machine. It had, by some miracle, survived the last explosion, and now sat enshrined in a circle of stones, like a tiny humming shrine to questionable beverage choices. Rex took a sip of Physium and gagged. "Still awful. That's consistency." Just then the ground vibrated. Not a big quake, just a shudder, like the planet was nervously clearing its throat. He sat up straight, grabbing his rifle with one hand and his snack with the other. "Nope," he said out loud. "Not dealing with another mutant mole beast. One existential crisis at a time, please." But it wasn't a mole beast. The vibration intensified, rhythmic now, measured. A tremor born not of tectonics, but machinery. He climbed the nearest ridge and froze. Hovering low over the horizon was a Dominion land cruiser, sleek, massive, and utterly out of place against the jagged ruins of Earth tech. Around it, drones buzzed in a precise grid formation, and in front of the cruiser stood Thalyara. She wasn't wearing her war gear, no armor, no halberd, no glowing plasma anything. Just a form-fitting travel suit, silver-lined, with a small pack slung over one shoulder. Her long ears twitched faintly in the heat. She looked relaxed, or at least as relaxed as an alien battle commander genetically engineered for conquest could look. Rex descended toward her slowly, cautiously. "Did I miss a memo? Or is this just the friendliest invasion ever?" She raised an eyebrow. "I came alone." "Okay, slightly less alarming." "I told them not to follow." "That definitely helps." They stood facing each other again, like the world's strangest sequel to a duel. Only this time, neither of them reached for weapons. "I've read the rest of your files," Thalyara said after a moment. "Your combat logs, tactical decisions, engineering improvisations." Rex made a face. "You mean my panic-scribbled notes and duct tape disasters?" She nodded. "Impressive panic, effective disasters." There was a long pause before she continued. "I told them you were not a threat." Rex blinked. "Wow. Thanks. I feel so profoundly insulted." "But," she added, "I also told them you were not to be underestimated. That your survival is not coincidence, but a product of something they do not yet understand." He gave her a long look. "Let me guess. Plucky human spirit." "Stubborn idiocy," she replied, but her mouth twitched at the edges again, her version of a grin. "I'll take it." Another silence stretched between them. This one wasn't awkward. It was the kind of quiet reserved for decisions. Big ones. Heavy ones. Thalyara looked past him, toward the crumbling remains of the human outpost. I've requested a reclassification of this zone, not as a war relic, as a preservation site, one that marks resistance and resilience. Rex's eyebrows rose. Wait, are you telling me you turned this place into a museum? Not a museum, a reminder. Same thing, but with worse gift shops. I have also petitioned to transfer command. I'm being reassigned. He stared at her. What? Why? Because, she said, and her voice dropped into something almost human. If I stayed, they would order me to finish the task, to kill you, and I'm no longer sure that would be a victory. Rex was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed softly. So what now? You ride off into the stars and I stay here talking to vending machines? I am permitted one companion, for cultural research. He narrowed his eyes. Companion? She stepped closer. Someone to teach me the parts of your species that our archives can't explain. Humor, ingenuity, irrational courage. Whatever yo mama jokes are, he choked. Okay, but full disclosure, I'm not exactly a role model. I've got terrible taste in snacks, I talk too much, and I once lost a game of chess to a chicken. You built a bomb out of dental equipment and a toaster. You survived a duel with a Varelian commander using sarcasm as a weapon. You impressed me. He looked down at his boots. You're really offering me a ride off this rock? A new posting, an uncertain one. You may not enjoy it. Rex smiled faintly. Uncertainty's kind of my thing. A low hum began behind her. The cruiser activating, ramp extending. Wind kicked up, tugging at their hair, their clothes, the edges of their hesitation. Are you sure? She asked. He took one last look at the ruins of his outpost, at the bent flagpole half buried in sand, at the charred panels and scorched earth that had once been his whole world. And then he turned to her. Only if the cruiser has a better vending machine. She extended a hand. He took it. Together they walked up the ramp, disappearing into the glow. And Proxima 9 was quiet again, only the ruins left behind, and the old vending machine humming softly in the heat.